Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, June the 7th. It's great to see so many people out in person tonight, and also welcome to those who are watching on the live stream, to staff and council. So I just wanted to advise everyone that this meeting is being audio, video recorded and live streamed on the Town of Innisfil's YouTube channel and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. And for more information on that bylaw, you can contact the clerk's office. So we'll start with as we always do, with our land acknowledgement. I would ask if Councillor Zanello could please offer that.
The Town of Innisfil acknowledges that the Town of Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island and is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you so much, Councillor Zanella. That will take us to item 2 of our agenda, which is open forum. We have one person who has signed up for the open forum tonight, and that is Adam Corella, and he is here to talk about notice of motion that's on tonight's agenda, item 10.1. So Adam, whenever you're ready, please come up to the podium and the mic, and you have, if you could keep it at about 2 minutes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. I was told I was talking at the end of the night, so I wasn't quite ready, but it's all good. The Kenneth Fowler has helped me out with putting together a notice of motion to look at the food truck bylaws within Innisfil. That's going to come up later today. I just wanted to bring up the fact that Innisfil is a large community. It's 250 square kilometers. Limiting to 10 food trucks just doesn't make sense. I think there's a lot of capacity to have far more than just the 10 there. There's 40 plus waterfront entrances where food trucks can set up in the summertime to feed the beachgoers. And as well, the purpose of a food truck is to be mobile. Limiting it to a set location just doesn't make sense. I think having it to the whole township of Innisfil would be a lot more beneficial to everybody. I just wanted to keep it nice and quick. I think Ken's going to go over it a little bit further today, but that's everything.
That's great. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
Next is item 3, which is the approval of the agenda. We have had one addition to the approval of the agenda, which is a notice of motion, item 10.2. Other than that, is there any agenda repair required? Anyone have anything else? Then I'd ask for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended. That would be Councillor Richardson and Councillor Waters. All those in favor? Any contrary? That is carried. Next, we'll go to disclosures of interest. Is there anyone who has pecuniary or conflict of interest on any of the items in tonight's agenda? Seeing none, if one becomes apparent to you through our discussions, please let it be known at that time. And next is item 5, and it's our annual pitch-in presentation, and we look forward to having that presentation every year. And it looks like Ms. Bennett is going to kick it off.
Be a good idea if I could see. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of Council, staff, and the public. My name is Sue Bennett, and tonight I am pleased to share with you the following update regarding the 2023 Pitch-In Annual Cleanup Event. Your Pitch-In Working Group, Ann Kell, Lynn Ciperni, Al Gilchrist, myself, Kim Creamer, Town Support, and Craig Hendry, Fire Services, wishes to thank everyone that participated in the 2023 Pitch-In Cleanup Day on Saturday, May 13th, with schools participating at the end of April and during the week of May 8th to the 12th. The online registration was a great success again this year, with 215 volunteers signing up to participate. Volunteers could pick up cleaning kits at the Town Hall, Lakeshore, Cookstown, and Stroud libraries, and at the Alcona, Lefroy, and Big Bay Point fire stations.
We wanted to extend our appreciation tonight to Natalie Graham and Christine Gillespie, Communications and Community Engagement Coordinators, for posting articles through the town's social media channels, for promotion on Curbex signs and town boundary signs, and for capturing the day's activities for us. The committee also wants to extend appreciation to Craig Hendry and the volunteer firefighters that assisted in handing out the cleaning kits. Kids that attended the Alcona Fire Station number 1 also enjoyed tours of the fire trucks that day. So this year, the committee received several nominations for the Debbie Mills Civic Pride Award, and that award recognizes the dedication of individuals in our community who have taken it upon themselves to maintain and clean Innisfil all year round. And this year, we're happy to present Carol Griffith with this award. So Carol takes pride in her community, and she does that by cleaning up debris from the roadways and spending several hours beautifying parks and repairing local landmarks. So thank you very much, Carol, for everything you do for the town.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Ann.
and this is for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you so much.
To support the hard work that our community volunteers do, an appreciation barbecue was hosted at Centennial Park. Everyone that attends can enjoy a free lunch, refreshments, draw prizes, nature walk, and library activities. Without the great support of our local sponsors and donations received, this event would not be the success it is today. The committee extends their appreciation to the wonderful people of our community. To recognize them, a thank you ad will be placed in the local paper, posted on our website, and on the town's social media channels. We appreciate those that registered in advance of Pitch-In Day and held a raffle wherein 5 random winners were selected and received a $25 local business gift card. Thank you for using the online registration form. The committee would be remiss if we did not extend our gratitude and appreciation to our customer service team, who worked hand in hand with operations services, taking calls so that our great road crew could collect bags and debris. Without the teamwork from all involved, none of this would be possible. And we just want to add, on behalf of the committee, all the school kids involved in this, and all the citizens of Innisfil, to Kim Creamer. Kim Creamer is our contact at the town. She's the person who keeps us in line. She's the driving force behind Pitch-In, and she has been for many, many years. And Kim, where's Kim? Kim, on behalf of everybody, thank you so very, very much.
And now for the Golden Broom Award, which is presented each year to a member of council that has the most volunteer participation in their ward. We are excited to announce that the winner of the 2023 Golden Broom Award goes to Councillor Jennifer Richardson. With honorary community winner, Deputy Mayor Ken Fowler. Congratulations to you both. Can we ask Councillor Richardson to come down for a picture with the broom? The Pitch-In Working Group appreciates the support received by the community, our volunteer staff, and council. Hope to see everyone next year for this great annual event on Saturday, May 14th, 2024. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you've been thanking everyone else, but I want to thank you, the working group, who is there, the same faces year after year. And a special thank you to Kim. I think it's 25 plus years that she's been champion of this event. And a big congratulations to Carol Griffith and to Jennifer. Other questions or comments? Seeing anybody have anything that they want to say? I just want to say you get a whole year to gloat, Jennifer, until Councillor, until it comes up again. Deputy Mayor?
During my last term, I had the privilege of chairing this committee. And this year, when the mayor said to me, we sat down and we were discussing who's going to be on what committee, she said, they don't need us. They're a well-oiled machine. Everything they do, they've got it set up, and at the very center of it, they have Kim. So, I mean, we became superfluous at that point. So everything you guys have accomplished over the years, everything I've seen you do when I was so green, you know, behind the ears, it was incredible. Thank you for every year you put together, for every year you beautify the town, for every year when I drive down the road and I see bag after bag after bag after couch after tire after things you ever think would be in a ditch that you guys make happen. You organize, you prepare, you plan, and you are all incredible. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Constantine.
Carol is always up and around in the community doing a great job, and I just want to congratulate her, and she deserves this award, the Debbie Mills Civics Award, and continue doing the great job that you're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Constantine. Councillor Richardson.
I just want to say thank you to all the residents in Ward 3 that participated in Pitch-In Day. Ward 3 proud.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other hands, the mover and a seconder, please, to receive the Pitch-In event presentation. Councillor Richardson, Councillor Constantine, all those in favor? That is carried. Thanks, everyone. Next on the agenda is item 6.1. Oh, now where are you all going? Because we're going to have a really nice discussion about development charge background studies. So why wouldn't you want to stay for that? It's very exciting.
They're going to celebrate. They're going to get the wine.
Thank you. So now we'll go to item 6.1, which is Hempson Consulting, and I believe we have Jackie Hall online, who's going to do a presentation with us about our development charges background study project update. And Mr. Binnings as well, and I want to thank you both for being here, and please don't take any of that to heart. We do very much enjoy our background studies because it gives us the money we need to pay for the growth infrastructure we need. So whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, members of council, mayor, staff, and members of the public who might still be interested in learning about development charges. We also like to poke fun at ourselves about DC, so that was a great introduction. This evening, as you mentioned, what I'd like to do over the next 25 minutes is provide an overview of the draft development charges rate calculation, along with some details in terms of what we've done to date with the project, and a few other important areas that I'd like to present and provide some information on. If we could move to the next slide. Just a bit of an agenda to help guide our discussion. We're going to be providing a background overview of what's been done to date, what development charges are, and why we're here today. We'll take a look at what services we're bringing forward as part of this update. The development forecast that is guiding our process and our calculation. We'll talk about the assumptions that are underpinning that analysis. We have our capital program summary as well. We'll get to our draft development charge rates, and also we will provide a rate comparison of where the town sits in relation to the calculated rates versus where other municipalities are. We'll talk about policy changes that we're looking at as part of this update, and then we'll wrap up with next steps and questions. I appreciate there's quite a bit of content that I'm going to go through today. And if possible, it would be great if we could hold the questions till the end, and which at that time we'll be able to address anything or any outstanding matters that are still there. As you mentioned, Craig Benning, who's the partner in charge of the municipal finance branch at Hempson, he is also present at the meeting today, and he'll be periodically popping in, likely to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So for that being said, we'll go ahead to the next slide. So the town, in order to collect development charges, we have to have a development charge bylaw, and the town currently has two of those. The first being bylaw 104-18, which was passed in September of 2018. It expires January 1st of 2024, which is why we are going through this process. There was an amendment to that bylaw that was done in November of 2021, and it was to address some legislative changes that actually allowed us to remove some discounts that were previously required through the legislation. And that bylaw, in order to align with some of the services that were not touched and were passed in 2018, that bylaw also expires January 1st, 2024 as well. So the goal of this process is to repeal both of those existing bylaws and bring forward a new DC bylaw based on updated rates, which are informed by new information. Next slide. Development charges are not the only tool that municipalities have available in order to fund growth-related capital, as we like to refer to it. There's a few other revenue tools or funding tools that are available. Recently, we completed a community benefits charges study for the town, which has allowed the town to levy those types of funds, and that is intended to fund the initial round of capital costs. It cannot overlap with development charges. In-kind contributions are permitted. However, it is capped at 4% of the land value, and it's very limited and only imposed on developments that are 5 or more stories with 10 or more housing units. Just going back to development charges quickly, development charges can only be used to fund the initial round of growth-related infrastructure. We have a very prescribed list of services that we are allowed to recover development charges for. Certain services have been removed in recent legislative changes. This includes parking, cemeteries, airports, affordable housing, and studies most recently, which does impact the town. There's also no more 10% discount, which is a helpful change, but there's been a lot of other changes since then. There's also parkland acquisition that it allows for the funding of parkland, which we cannot fund through the DCs or the CDCs if it's accounted for through the parkland acquisition. And essentially, there's a standard rate of 5% for residential and 2% for non-residential. Most recently, there's been some changes to the legislation which have changed the alternative rate that we are able to levy for parkland dedication, and there's new rules that effectively cap the amount that we can bring forward. There's also cash in lieu permissions that allow developers to contribute cash as opposed to land, which is important. In addition to those tools, we also have things like direct developer contributions. So that it relates to costs that would normally be required as part of a subdivision agreement. So that could be things like internal roads, sidewalks, streetlights, intersections, and park elements. Those are typically not included in our background study or in the development charges calculation and are funded directly by developers. We also have other revenue raising tools such as property taxes. We also have our utility rates or water wastewater fees, and that's intended to fund our statutory and non-statutory reductions for development charges. It also relates to our operating expenditures, so our long-term repair and replacement of municipal assets. And I will note that the development charges, CBCs, and parkland acquisitions, all of those are appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal with certain conditions. Next slide. The schematic on the screen in front of you provides an overview of how we calculate development charges. The legislation is quite prescriptive in what we can do, and so we have to follow a fairly strict methodology in order to arrive at the rates that we will be presenting today to you. We start with a development forecast, which looks at the amount, type, and location, and that essentially forms what we call our growth-related capital needs. So what we need to build in order to service that future development. The Act also requires that for many of our services, we're restricted by what we call a 15-year historic service level. That effectively sets the historic average service level that's been provided in the municipality or the town over the last 15 years and limits what we can fund from DCs in the future. Effectively, we can't go over and above what has been done historically. We then look at our capital needs eligible for funding from development charges. And the legislation then requires that we make a whole host of adjustments related to any sort of anticipated grants, contributions from other municipalities. There's also something called benefit to existing shares, which effectively account for any sort of benefit that capital infrastructure provides to existing residents or employees in the town. We count for any sort of available DC reserve balances or negative reserve balances. And we also make an adjustment for any shares of projects that will benefit growth occurring beyond our planning horizon as well. After we make all those adjustments, we end up with what we call our costs eligible for DC recovery. These are the costs that get put into our rate calculation. They're then divvied up or allocated between our residential and non-residential sectors. Our residential sectors are then calculated on a per unit basis, and our non-residential sector is based on a per square meter of gross floor area, or GFA. Next slide. Next slide. Perfect. Thank you. For the services that we're looking to bring forward as part of the town's 2023 DC background study update, we have several townwide services, including libraries, fire and police services, parks and recreation, public works, municipal fleet, roads and related services. We're also introducing a new category of service related to bylaw this time around as well. We also have various area specific services, water and wastewater specifically. And I'll get into that in a couple of slides in the presentation, but there's specific areas in the town in which we calculate development charges where infrastructure provides a more localized benefit, and therefore it's reasonable for us to recover those based on smaller geographic areas, as opposed to doing it on a townwide basis like we do for things such as library, fire, police, and parks. Next slide. For members of council, as part of this information session, what we would like to inform you of is your key decision points throughout this process. So in approving the background study and the bylaw, we are asking that you consider and approve the capital programs that are being brought forward. We also, in accordance with the legislation, have to give consideration for area rating. And as part of this update, the town has already had that practice for several background studies now in terms of our area-specific development charges, and we're recommending that the town continue with that historical practice for its water and wastewater services. The Development Charges Act only requires us to have one public meeting in order to meet the consultation requirements. To date, we've already held one meeting with the town's developer liaison group. That was done on April 3rd. We have another one scheduled for next week where we're going to present information very similar to what we're bringing before yourselves this evening. And we also have our statutory public meeting scheduled for August 16th. So just wanted to highlight some of the consultation that's been going on as it is over and above what the minimum requirements of the legislation identify. There's also the decision as to how we implement the rates and the considerations within the context of recent legislative changes, which I'll talk a little bit about. Whether or not we introduce full or partial rates, the legislation actually requires us to do a mandatory 5-year phase-in now, and also any sort of exemptions or discounts that are over and above what's required by the Act. Finally, it's actually just the approval of the bylaw itself. That's also an important element of the process that I'm sure everyone is aware of. Next slide. In terms of the development forecast and the assumptions that we're using to underpin our calculations, we have looked at the total population, employment, and dwelling unit growth over the planning horizon out to 2051. It's been informed based on a review of 2021 StatsCan data. The County of Simcoe recently did an MCR, and so we've also reviewed and incorporated that analysis. And as well, on top of that, we've also had population and employment numbers come out of the draft Orbit secondary plan. And so all of that's been accounted for in the development forecast. We have a historical period of 2008 to 2022. So we look at things based on that historical planning horizon. And then going forward, we have a 10-year period of 2023 to 2032 for services such as library, fire, parks and recreation, We look out to 2051 for transportation and 2041 for water and wastewater, which is based on the current horizons of the relevant master plans that we're using to inform our infrastructure needs. So as you can see, we have quite a bit of growth that we're anticipating in the town out to 2051. In 2021, the population of the town was just shy of 45,000, and you can see that we're growing upwards of 110,000 by 2051, so quite significant. Similarly, on the employment side, we had about 13,000 employees in 2021, and we're looking at closer to 30,300 employees in 2051. Next slide. The growth-related capital programs that we have brought into the study have been informed by a number of different areas. We have done a comprehensive review with staff of the 2018 and 2021 background studies to verify the projects that were included. We've also aligned costing and timing of projects with the 2023 capital budget, where master plans exist and timing and costs have been identified, such as the 2018 Master Servicing Plan, the recent 2022 TMP, and the ongoing Land and Lakes Master Plan. Those have also been brought into our analysis. And of course, we've made those adjustments that I mentioned earlier for any sort of grants, subsidies, or other contributions if there is a benefit to existing or replacement component, if there's been any reserve balances that are available or negative reserve balances, and also any sort of benefit that will be provided beyond the periods that we've identified. Next slide. I appreciate there is quite a bit of data on the slide in front of you here, so I will just quickly highlight the numbers that are most important to our calculation. So we've divided the tables into two different categories of services. This is our town-wide capital program. So our general services that are based on a 10-year program that includes library, fire, police, parks and rec, public works. The total gross cost of that capital program on the far left-hand side amounts to just over $445 million. After we make all those adjustments I mentioned, the actual cost that we bring forward as part of our rate calculation is $154 million. Now, when we layer in the roads and related costs, which extend out to 2051, when we total those together, the program is quite significant at just shy of $1.3 billion. However, what we're proposing to bring forward as part of our rate calculation is $740 million. So that's a combination of both the 10-year and long-term planning horizon, recognizing as well that your roads and related services are going to be a very significant expenditure that will occur over the coming years. And that's very consistent with what is found in other municipalities, as well as just the capital expenditures related to roads and related infrastructure is quite significant. Next slide. So what you see on the slide in front of you is our current calculated draft residential rates by the various unit types. And so what we've identified or what we've calculated is a rate of $53,646 for single and semi-detached, and that varies based on the different dwelling units, with the lowest being, or the lowest being $23,953 for a small apartment with a bachelor or one bedroom. The rates that you see vary based on the occupancies that are attributed to these different unit types. So for example, a single detached home has a higher occupancy rate than a small apartment. So therefore, that's why the rate is higher. And this is all tied to Statistics Canada data that we have based on the occupancies of those dwelling units. In terms of how that rate is related to our services over our planning horizon. So roads and related services make up the bulk of our charge at 48%. Parks and Recreation is also fairly significant at 33%. And the remaining services make up the residual. And so once again, this does not include the area-specific water and wastewater rates. So in those areas where those charges are applicable, the rates would be higher. And I'll get to that in a couple of slides. Next slide. To provide a comparison of what the rate is currently today, if you were to go to the counter and pay a development charge for a single and semi-detached unit in the town, you'd be looking at about $48,400. With our fully calculated rate, once it's fully phased in, the amount is $53,650, which is about 11% increase overall. The main drivers of the increase relate to Parks and Recreation, and Roads and Related Services. Fire Services has also come up quite a bit, and that's just a review of the services, or a function of the historic service levels, the capital expenditures, and the planning horizons that we're looking at as well. Next slide. On the non-residential side of things, the calculated rate that we have identified is $152.62 per square meter. Once again, we see that similar composition of roads and related is the majority of the charge. However, there's certain services that we don't attribute to the non-residential sector. That includes things like parks and libraries. The reason being is that those services are primarily driven and provided for residential or residents of the town, and therefore those costs are 100% attributed to that sector. Other services, however, such as fire, police, public works, and fleet and bylaw, those are driven based on the growth of both population and employment in the town. Therefore, the development charge rate is calculated both on a residential and non-residential basis. Next slide. So once again, providing a quick comparison of the current versus calculated rate on a per square meter basis. Today, if you were to pay a development charge for a non-residential development, you're looking at $130.16 a square meter. Once the fully calculated rates are brought forward, the total that we've identified is $152.60. That's an increase of about 17%. Next slide. I did mention at the beginning of the presentation that there's been some changes recently in terms of what we do or what we're required to do under the Development Charges Act. And I apologize, the table is quite small, but I'm going to provide a few more examples in a couple of slides. But essentially, we now are only able to charge 80% of the fully calculated rate in the first year after the bylaw is introduced. Over the 5-year period, or over 5 years, it is then phased into 100% of what we've identified. So you could see in 2027 for a single and semi-detached unit, I mentioned the rate of $53,646. That's when that rate will fully come into force. In the first year, you're only paying 80% of that, which is $42,917. Next slide. The area-specific services in the town are, as I mentioned, for water and wastewater infrastructure, primarily driven by the linear infrastructure that has a more localized benefit. So that's your water pipes and your wastewater pipes as well. And so we have our servicing areas, which cover a variety of sub areas as well. And so as part of this update, we're not proposing to make any changes to the current areas. Once the town has completed its master servicing plan, there's an update currently underway. There would likely be an opportunity to review the boundaries and see if there's any sort of need to adjust or maybe consolidate some of these servicing areas. But recognizing that we're basing our analysis on the 2018 master plan, we are proposing to keep things consistent with what is currently in force in the town. Next slide. The capital program for both water and wastewater, as I mentioned, is based on those various areas of, so there's 5 servicing areas: Innisfil North, Friday Harbor, Innisfil South, Innisfil Central, and Cookstown. In addition, there are wastewater treatment. There's a wastewater treatment facility and wastewater supply that is applied for the most part uniformly across those areas, as it provides a much broader benefit. And within the various areas, we have linear infrastructure or more localized infrastructure, such as water mains, pumping stations, storage, sanitary sewers. And so from the water perspective, the totality of the capital program that we're proposing to bring forward as part of our rate calculation is $275 million, the bulk of which is being made up of the water treatment plant, which is just shy of $110 million, and also the infrastructure needs in Innisfil Central, which is $107 million. On the wastewater side, we have $588 million in capital expenditures that we're proposing to fund through the DC rates. Once again, the bulk of it is related to the plant infrastructure, so the wastewater supply, and that's just shy of $310 million. Innisfil Central also has quite a bit of localized infrastructure, which is identified at just shy of $190 million. Next slide. So once we layer in the town-wide rates as well as the area-specific water and wastewater charges, we have a snapshot of what our current versus calculated rates are per single and semi-detached unit for each area. So you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, the chart there identifies the current rates in green and the calculated rates in gold for each of those 5 areas. So Innisfil North, for example, its current rate is just shy of $72,000 per single and semi-detached. Once the rates are fully phased in, it's expected to, or it has been calculated at $82,200. The non-residential rates are done on a bit of a different methodology. They're done on a uniform town-wide basis. And so currently the rate, including water and wastewater infrastructure, sits at just shy of $320 per square meter. And once the fully calculated rates are phased in, that would amount to a charge of $335 per square meter. I would also note as well, there are some agreements that have been made with developers specifically through the IDAG. And so they will only contribute to phase 3 of the wastewater treatment plant. And that's something that will be specifying in the bylaw that will be coming forward as part of this process. Next slide. So similar to the town-wide example, just showing how the phase-in will work in Innisfil North, I gave that example of the current versus calculated rate. So here we see that the current rate in Innisfil North is $65,740, and that's going to increase to about $82,000 once the rates are fully phased in. Similarly, if we look at Innisfil South, the current rate is $65,030 per single and semi-detached unit, and that is increasing to $81,300. Next slide. So it's a little tricky to provide a comparison of the current versus calculated rates, recognizing that they are being phased in incrementally over the planning period. And so what we've done here is provided a snapshot of how the rates will be increasing over the 5-year duration of the phase-in. So in Innisfil North, for example, in year 1, you'll actually be paying 9% less than what you would be today at the counter. Similarly, in Innisfil South, that's a decrease of 21%. And then over that period, as the residual of the increase phases in, if you're comparing year over year, it will be increasing. Cookstown as well, the first year of the phase-in represents a 6% decrease, so it's actually a decrease in the rates. And then over the 5-year period, once again, it will be phased in to the calculated increase, and we're looking at an increase of about 6% year over year. On the non-residential side, we see a similar pattern. On year 1, it's a reduction of 16% of what's currently being identified as the non-residential rate. And then over the 5-year period, it will incrementally be increased, and we're looking at about a 6 to 5% phase in year over year, or increase year over year, rather. Next slide. So I will just provide a bit of caution with our rate comparisons. They are helpful. We get asked for them a lot from both the public, the developers, and also council. They are helpful to paint a picture of where the town lies in relation to other municipalities. However, the challenge with doing these comparators is that it sometimes can be a bit of an apples to oranges comparison. The various municipalities you see on the screen here have different populations. They have different growth pressures. They have different compositions of their services. And all of those factors contribute to what the rates ultimately end up being. What we've done is on the slide in front of you, we've provided a comparison of other Simcoe County municipalities in relation to 2 of the areas in Innisfil, 3 of the areas in Innisfil. So we've done the year 1 and year 5 calculated rates for Innisfil North, South, and Innisfil Central. The year 1 phase-ins are shown in the green arrow. So once the bylaw is implemented, that's where the town would be in relation to the other areas or the other Simcoe municipalities. The arrows in red show what the 5-year fully calculated rates would be. A lot of these municipalities have not gone through a background study update where they've had to introduce the phase-in, with the exception of the city of Barrie, which is currently in their development charges process right now. They will be bringing forward a new bylaw on June 21st. And so to help show their current versus calculated rates as well, we've shown Barrie, Salem, and Hewitt's calculated at year 1, so they're the third from the top. And then once their rates are fully phased in, you can see that their charge will be just over $130,000 per single and semi-detached. Next slide. Since that was just the Simcoe comparisons, what we'd like to do is show how Innisfil is situated in the context of other GTA municipalities. Once again, municipalities that have similar services, population growth pressures. We know that the town is expanding quite rapidly, so we thought it was appropriate to paint the picture or provide the context of what's happening in other jurisdictions such as Vaughan, Brampton, East Gwillimbury, Markham, and so forth. So you can see once the town brings forward the year 1 calculated rates for Innisfil North, South, and Central, it's relatively low compared to where some of these other municipalities are sitting. However, as we bring forward the 5-year phase-in, we would expect that the cost per single and semi-detached would increase. That being said, these other municipalities will likely go through their process of updating their rates as well. So in year 1, their increase versus year 5 could also look different. And so as we, go forward with this process, and as this is a new requirement, you'll likely be seeing a lot of comparators with year 1 increases, year 5 increases, and so on and so forth. Next slide. Now, because the non-residential rate is calculated on a uniform basis, we didn't break out the different areas for the town. And so therefore we could fit a little bit more on one slide. So this helps to paint the picture of what's going on both in Simcoe as well as some of those other GTA municipalities. So you can see that the town is pretty much in the middle of the pack based on the year 1 and year 5 fully calculated rates. And I apologize there. I believe that they're both showing the same number. But nonetheless, the relationship there of where the town is in position and relative to the other municipalities would be relatively consistent with that in terms of the middle of the pack. Next slide. Just to provide some context in terms of the DC legislation changes that I was speaking to, there has been several amendments to legislation in recent years. Bill 108 was first introduced, the More Homes, More Choice Act. We then had further amendments introduced through Bill 197, the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act. We have the Bill 23, which most recently came into force and introduced a lot of the changes that I've talked about this evening. There was also one of the key things that is driving development pressures in the province right now is the June 2022 election mandate, which was the affordability and goal of building 1.5 million new homes constructed by 2031. There are exemptions that are coming forward. If we go to the next slide, for both affordable and attainable housing that is not yet in force. So at this time, we're not proposing to bring that forward as part of the town's bylaw, as that will be, once it's introduced through the legislation, the bylaw will be superseded. As I mentioned, our fully calculated rates have to be phased in over 5 years. There's new exemptions for nonprofit housing. Rental housing or discounts for rental housing is based on number of units. That's now a statutory requirement as well. And our bylaws no longer expire after 5 years. They actually have a life now of 10 years. So that's a change that happened recently and will also be brought forward. Over the next little bit, as we move forward in terms of preparing the DC bylaw, we're continuing to review the current bylaw definitions and rate structures and just making sure that everything aligns and makes sense with the way in which the town is developing and growing. We're also looking at the possibility of implementing more than one DC bylaw. Because of the 5-year phase in, there is the potential that if a bylaw was to be amended, we would have to start back at year 1 of the phase-in. So we might be bringing forward different bylaws for different types of services. in order to future-proof and address some of that risk. Next slide. So just a little bit of context of what we've been doing over the course of May. We brought forward some draft rates. We've discussed it with the town. We've also met with the In-Services Board to review the draft rates. Going forward, we are meeting with the DLG next week to have a similar discussion and presentation. The idea being is that we're going to draft the background study over the next month or so, with the idea of releasing it publicly in late July and then holding that statutory public meeting on August 16th. Following that public meeting, we'll, if required, revise the DC rates and background study. And then the idea would be to pass the new bylaws at the end of September and then prepare a notice notifying that that has been done. So with that being said, I will stop there for questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Great presentation. Lots of it, lots packed in there, kind of a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, I'm sure, particularly from some of the new councillors, but also understanding your world has been turned upside down with this latest change in legislation as well. So I'll go to members of council for questions or comments. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for that presentation. I see quite a bit of work went into the residential charges where we have 4 or 5 different zones in the town. I experienced in Innisfil Heights, our employment area, there's a whole variety of different types of businesses there, whether they're retail or factory or storage. But when I look at the non-residential charges, it's just one charge per square meter. Was there any thought put into having different levels for the different uses that we might have in those situations?
Ms. Hall?
Yes, through your worship, that's an excellent question. So the uniform approach to the non-residential rate calculation is consistent with what we've done as part of our previous DC bylaws and background studies. As part of the 2018 Master Servicing Plan, which we also used for the basis of this update, it was determined that it can be quite challenging to specifically identify where the non-residential growth is occurring and at those rates. It is something that we'll look at for subsequent updates once the new 2023 Master Servicing Plan is completed. But at this time, we still think it's reasonable and appropriate to levy the charge on a uniform town-wide basis.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
I guess with my experience in Innisfil and our employment lands being so diverse, I wonder if that can be explored somewhat. For a business owner to pay the same development charges for a warehouse that just stores product versus a factory or some other type of building, it seems unfair to the businesses. So that would be my comment.
Thank you. Can I ask Ms. Hall, is that done in any other jurisdiction?
Yes, through your worship, and yes to you as well. It is done in other jurisdictions, differentiated non-residential rate. The challenge with it, and just to address the councillor's last comment, is that it can create higher rates in some areas and lower rates in others. I think that there's also a couple different things that we're looking at. The different non-residential sectors, so an industrial development versus a commercial development. That is something that can be examined as part of the background study process, looking at, say, a differentiated non-residential rate between retail and non-retail, or industrial and non-industrial. That's typically the different non-residential rates that we examine. We haven't looked at that as part of this analysis because it hasn't been raised yet, but there are municipalities that have brought forward say, an industrial versus non-industrial rate.
Yeah, so I would comment that perhaps our staff could be more in tune with those differences, and maybe we could look to work something into the study.
I think maybe even hearing a bit from staff about the pros and cons of doing such would be really helpful. I know in the past, if I'm right, I think we've artificially discounted our non-residential DCs in order as an investment attraction tool for businesses. But again, then they have to be paid by somebody else. So are you then putting more on the households to attract the businesses? And then my final comment would be there's so many changes to the development charges this year. We're going to be shortchanged, depending on the affordable housing piece and depending on and the phase-in is going to really be a challenge for us this year. But those are just my comments. Mr. Milanishin?
Thank you, through your worship. I think the key area we're discussing here is the Innisfil Heights, and I think we're developing the economic development strategy, which will inform the target industries that we're having in there. Is it ideally that we all want warehousing in there, which is basically large gross square footage without many jobs? So those are the kind of things I think the economic development strategy will bring out, and then on the future iterations of the background study, we will be able to incorporate further categories, if you want to call it, of development charges.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, so this is the first time that I've been on council that we've had the chance to talk about development charges, and this bylaw does last for at least 5 years. So I think it would be important for economic development to think about those things and what are we trying to attract there, and have that as a basis for some of these charges.
Mr. Jershow?
I think we can definitely look at the multiple categories through this review. I mean, that's part of why we're here with council tonight at an early enough stage that we can consider those questions. So we'll look into it.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Just to comment on what we're just discussing now in terms of the economic strategy, I think I really like the idea of using that as an opportunity to attract the right type of businesses. Like, do we want big warehouses, or do we want talented, skilled individuals working on those lands? So if it's an opportunity to put that in our economic strategy, I think that would be a wise decision. So I kind of like that idea. In terms of just questions, I have 3 questions, and one, as Councillor Ice has mentioned, it's the first time we've had a chance to talk about this. So some of my questions may come out of ignorance, so please excuse me if they are. But I guess my first question is that we see DCs covering things like water and wastewater, which is infrastructure. We see it covering roads, which is infrastructure. So my question is, why does this not cover things like hydro, which is infrastructure, gas, which I know gas is private. Hydro is a public utility that we own. So I'm just kind of curious, why does DC cover some infrastructure but not other infrastructure? That's my first question.
Mr. Binning?
Yes, it's a very good question. And we're dealing with restrictions under the legislation now because we have a very prescribed list of services that are eligible for DC funding. Hydroelectric services previously were eligible for funding, and in some circumstances they are, but as soon as you put them into the kind of corporate structure that you have now, they can't formally use development charges, but they have other mechanisms for funding initial capital costs through what are called connection charges, and that extends through to private sector utilities that do it as well. So the reason you're not seeing maybe some services is just because we can't, under the legislative framework, levy for those capital needs.
My question specifically around generation of electricity. So if there was an opportunity where infrastructure around generation was possible, then municipalities could generate electricity locally using DC charges as opposed to hooking up to the grid. So that was my angle of getting at, was that opportunity to generate our own electricity, but covered by DC charges.
So, yes, through the mayor, if the councilor is referring to sort of energy from waste opportunities, those costs are not specifically eligible for funding through development charges. They're excluded.
Thank you. My second question is around, and please, anyone who sees my next question as an issue, is around an email we just recently received around certain clients or builders who are applying to OLT, and I'm just kind of curious, what are those objections to our DC charges?
Mr. Melanishan?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Waters. The recent notification that we received from application for appeal to the OLT, we haven't had a chance to sift through those yet. We just received them 2 days ago, so we are working through those. Those are very specific to the CBC, so the Community Benefit Charges Background Study, and not the development charges. So there's a little bit of a subtle distinction there. That's the new bylaw that was passed in the end of April. That we have some minor questions or concerns from a developer group that we are going to be handling and working with Hempson to see how we'll handle the appeal. But there is two separate bylaws.
Thank you. And my last question is to our consultants, who have done a great job, by the way. I really appreciate it. Second time I've listened to this presentation, and I'm learning more every time I listen to it. So thank you very much for your clear and concise presentations. My last question is one of interest, but does development pay for development in these cases?
Mr. Binning.
Yes, Jackie, I'll take this one. I mean, ultimately, the Development Charges Act never provided a full funding of first round capital costs associated with development. There's always been legislative discounts, restrictions. Up until Bill 23, I've been on the record of saying I think it's quite a good balance of legislative recoveries, and we've been quite progressive in terms of comparing ourselves with other jurisdictions in Canada and even North America. Bill 23 in and of itself has introduced a series of limitations and restrictions on recoveries that mean that there will be significant amounts of development-related capital infrastructure that are no longer funded from DCs and will ultimately, unless the province steps forward and makes us whole, or you whole, will be funded from property taxes and utility rates. So it's a good tool, but it does not fully fund development-related capital infrastructure needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say, Councillor Waters, that Bill 23 took about as big a hit to the development charges than anything I've seen in my 28 years. And it ebbs and flows. There was a time when things like museums and town halls were allowed to be, cultural centers were DC eligible. So it's been chipped away, and it does ebb and flow, but this is a real chop off at the knees, in my opinion. Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Drodge.
Through you, Your Worship, this is a first-time councillor question. So our municipality breaks our different areas down for different DC charges. Do other municipalities do the same thing?
Ms. Hall?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, absolutely. But it's done on a very service-specific basis and is done on a very municipal-specific basis as well. So in order to have an area-specific development charge, the infrastructure has to be necessitated by development on within a defined geographic area. And so it's typically or commonly used for water and wastewater, linear infrastructure, or pump infrastructure, which the town is currently doing.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I just had a few, and it was it's actually in the staff report, the Treasurer's staff report, which we'll be considering along with also receiving this delegation today. So my first question was on 2 of 4 on the staff report, item section 2 sub 1. It says exemptions for existing rental residential buildings. And I wonder how you can exempt something that's already built. I think I'm reading this wrong. Ms. Webb?
Your Worship, I would defer looking to Hempson for clarification on that wording. That is wording that I believe, I think I took some from some material that was provided by Hempson.
Thank you. So this is Table 1. It's the Bill 23 changes to the Development Charges Act. Ms. Hall?
Yes, Your Worship, just to provide clarification on that. So there is an exemption for residential units being added to existing rental residential buildings. So I think that's where the terminology is coming from. And so essentially it's saying that if you're adding additional units to that existing rental, there's an exemption for development charges within certain parameters. So the legislation says you can have 1 residential unit or 1% of the existing residential units are exempt from DCs.
Thank you. And then under 5.4, it talks about, well, we used to be able to, the cost of actually doing these studies was DC eligible, and now that isn't the case. So the cost of this study, did we budget for a DC study for 2023?
Yes, Your Worship. So we did budget for this, but because this was already budgeted, we are still funding this from our DC General Government Reserve.
And through the mayor, just to additional clarification, the legislation is for subsequent or new bylaws. So your current bylaw continues to allow for the recovery of studies. And so monies that are in the general government or studies reserve can be used to fund this study and other studies until you implement a new bylaw.
Wonderful, thank you. Sorry to be getting into the weeds here a bit, but the 26.2 was, it talks about DCs for rental housing development are now discounted based on the number of bedrooms. I just wonder when that comes into effect. Is it come into effect immediately? Ms. Hall?
Yes, Your Worship, it is in effect now.
Thank you. One more, and then I'll stop. Actually, 2 more. The first one is about, it gives now requirements that municipalities must spend or allocate much of what is in our reserves for each year. And I just wondered if Ms. Webb could let us know, is that going to be an issue? Is that something we already do, or is that something that we're going to have to do in the future?
Yes, Your Worship. So we've been doing this for a while. So when we prepare a capital budget, typically we are budgeting for the whole project upfront, and we're committing those funds. And so we show those committed dollars. And so typically, just because of the way we are budgeting, and we're budgeting for that whole project and making that commitment, typically we are committing more than 60% of the funds that we have on hand.
Thank you. And this is my last one, I promise. And I'm sorry, I should have given you a heads up. So the project timeline talks about passing the bylaw September the 27th. So if that bylaw is appealed, what happens on January 1st, 2024?
So the way the bylaw, the legislation provision works is once you pass a new bylaw, the new rates are in effect from the date of the effective date of the bylaw. If you have an appeal, you continue to carry forward those rates. And then if through an appeal process, the rates are reduced, then you're required to provide rebates to anyone who's paid charges. So the new rates come into force and effect on the effective date of the bylaw. If that was a question to the mayor.
That was. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments on this? Seeing none, I want to thank Ms. Hall and Mr. Binning very much for the very detailed presentation, and for Ms. Webb for a very detailed report. And a mover and a seconder, please, to receive both. That would be Councillor Zanella and Councillor Waters. All those in favor. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to item 7. So item 7 on the agenda is where anyone who's been appointed by this council to sit on another board or commission can speak about any activities that has happened during that time. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. The Library Board has not met, but we did have our Library Board fundraising committee meet, and we've got a great team together for that, and we'll be having some really cool, amazing, we've got some really great ideas and exciting events that we've got planned, so I'm excited about that.
Wonderful. Anyone else who is committee meeting? Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On May 27th, the Simcoe Streams Committee planted 500 trees at Innisfil Beach Park, and we had about 30 community volunteers. So it was a great day. It was hot, and we had lots of young people out and planted a lot of trees.
Thank you, Councillor Zanella. Council's going to have to chip in and buy you a pair of rubber boots. You've been planting a lot of trees this year. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week or the week before, I can't remember, we were at Sunnybray with the Accessibility Board learning with the kids. They had a great time. Councillor Richardson and I were there, and we just had a really good time. Learned a lot about the stuff that was going on with the kids. And tomorrow we are at Killarney Beach, and we have 90 some odd students as opposed to 30. So instead of a 3-hour day, we have a full day. So I think Ms. Kramer and I would appreciate any coffee brought down to us. And so, yeah, we're just looking forward to it. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. It's great for the kids to breaking down barriers and learn what life is like with a disability. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. On May 26th, I attended a virtual Nanawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. There was a presentation on the Conservation Authority's watershed stewardship services. And you'll be happy to know that the dollar that we provide in our levy gets leveraged to $5, where very important projects are put in place. There's the Healthy Waters Grant Incentive Program, River Restoration Program, Grassland Restoration, Volunteer Tree Planting, like Councillor Zanella, and Phragmites Control. So it was a very interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ices. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. This past weekend, virtually, the Heritage Committee got together, and we had a Heritage Information session with Wayne Morgan, who is the president of Community Heritage Ontario. It is actually very, very detailed how they list homes to getting them, what qualifies them, the history, the background, everything from schools to buildings to something that, for example, if a specific event occurred within the property, it was a great deal of information, and I'd like to thank Kevin Jacobs for forwarding the information to us after the fact, because it was just, as the mayor puts it, drinking from a fire hose, the amount of information. But there's a need for this right now to be as informed as possible, as Bill 23 is now in effect, and it is lit a fire under us to get as many houses fully listed as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Constantine.
On Saturday, Councillor Zanella and myself, we attended a conference in Cookstown. It's the Amadian Foundation, and the topic was about empowering women, and it was such a good discussion. It was great, and both of us we fill in for the mayor because she could not be there, so we took your job for one day, and it was really good. So That's what I have to say.
Thank you, and thank you both for doing that. Any other committees of council? I've just got a couple, so we've already heard from In-Services, Power, and Enterprises tonight, but last week Power staff had a staff workshop, and as a director, they invited, I attended the first hour and a half, but it was very informative, and all the staff were in the same room, so it was great to hear their questions and concerns. Also, there will be a traffic safety committee meeting on Tuesday. We're still doing those virtually, but anybody can attend if you wish to attend and you contact the clerk's office. They will make sure that you get a code or a Zoom link to get into the meeting. And County Council is doing strategic planning. It starts Tuesday, and again, we are back in person, but you can live stream to watch any of those meetings. So for those watching, you can see that your council here works a lot more than just Wednesday nights. And that's that. So we'll go to item 8, which is our consent list. So we'll go through the items on the agenda. If you want to ask a question, please do. If you want to pull for any changes and recommendations or further debate or more fulsome debate, we'll send that to Committee of the Whole for that. So item 8.1, the special council meeting minutes dated May 24th. A2, the council meeting minutes dated May 24th. B1, the traffic safety advisory committee meeting minutes. B2, the heritage advisory committee meeting minutes from May 11th. C1, the MOU between the Town of Innisfil and Ontario Ministry of Transportation. Deputy Mayor Fowler?
I'd like to put that in committee of the whole, please.
C2, the flag and banner etiquette and use policy update. And then items D, staff reports for information. D1, the short-term accommodation enforcement update. Deputy Mayor Fowler?
I'd like to pull for discussion, please.
Thank you. And bylaws, E1, the bylaw of the corporation for co-op students as a septic reinspection program. Seeing none, I just wanted to say this is a really important part of both the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan and the Source Protection Plan. I was on a call yesterday with the Severn Sound Environmental Association, and they've armed their septic inspector people with little goodie bags that have information about good septic care management and things like that. I thought that was a really good idea, and I thought I'd pass it on. Item F is correspondence for action. There's none. So G1 is the Innisfil Library Board meeting minutes. G2, the South Simcoe Police Services Board minutes. G3, the County of Simcoe meeting highlights. Just that our student from Sunnybray was in that for winning the Paramedic of the Year award. Student Paramedic of the Year award. G4 is a proclamation for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. G5, the longest day of smiles. That proclamation is for dentists who give their time for babies with cleft palates. And the proclamation for St. John's Ambulance Week, and we will have a flag raising in the future. And that's everything. So now we'll move that the consent, the recommendations that are on that were not pulled be approved. Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? That is carried. And we'll go to item C1. Oh no, first we have to go into Committee of the Whole, sorry. Resolved to Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Constantine. All those in favor? That is carried. Now we'll go into C1.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Ices is seconding this for me. I'm reading the reports on the off-ramp that they're looking over the 6-line bridge, and I'm liking the idea, in theory. I'm reading the report, and I come across the financial considerations, and it jumps up from approximately 2.9 million remains in RDS 254. This is required not only to fund the staff time dedicated to the project, but to cover the costs to acquire all the remaining lands required for the interchange. Further down in the article, or in the paragraph, it states that there's going to be an additional $3.1 million. That's literally doubling it. And it's saying, it's using the terms financial consideration and additional financials, I believe is the term. Now, I can understand that there's an increase in property value, but additional financials, if I could get some clarification on that, I really would appreciate it.
Ms. Lee, Director Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Through to Deputy Mayor Fowler. So there are additional costs for the staff time for the survey work that would be, so there's increased financial costs on all the parts of the acquisition. So the reference plans that have to be completed. So all of those costs have increased since we did some of the south side acquisition a number of years ago. So it would include those costs as well as as part of that land acquisition process.
Just so if it doesn't reach the $6 million mark, it will be going back into the fund, returning to it?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Deputy Mayor Fowler, that's correct. It would only use the monies that were required for that and would be funded through the development charges.
Okay. And one other thing, please. Now, it says as well, it's 100% recoverable versus DC charges. Normally, I wouldn't bat an eyelash and say that's very sound reasoning, but with Bill 23, how much of an impact do you see that having on the recovery of the DC charges?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Deputy Mayor Fowler, I'm not the financial expert, but the discounting for that first 5 years would be a factor, obviously, in our overall development charges, but the amount that we are looking for the land acquisition is 100% funded. So we can ask for all of that through that. It's the collection of those development charges that's discounted.
Anyone else have questions or comments on this item? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I wanted to commend staff in the past who had the foresight to at least purchase the land that we did. So with that, I'm wondering where the land that needs to be purchased is. It predominantly the north side then of the highway or the 6th?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Ices. The majority would be on the north side, Councillor Ices, but based on MTO going through sort of the further addendum work, there may be additional lands beyond what the town already acquired previously that are still required. So they're just starting the process, so we don't have a firm understanding of all of the lands, and that's where the costs are also sort of factored in to assume worst case scenario.
So the 3.1 is assuming on the high side is what we're thinking.
That's correct. And okay. Sorry, to clarify, south side, not north side.
Right.
Other questions or comments? I want to say that this, in my opinion, is a really good news story. This intersection wasn't really on the list for the next while. We've been advocating for it. I think we've been to Minister Mulrooney 2 or 3 times asking for this intersection. One time we got well, it's not really on our radar. And then the second time we didn't even get a meeting. So when they contacted us to say that this was now on the radar, I thought it was a really good news story. And the idea of being co-proponents on it as well. But I also wondered about the county and whether the county would have a role to play. I know they did when the new interchange went in at line 5 and the 400 in Bradford.
Through to you, Mayor Dolan. At this point in time, because this will be an addendum to the EA that was done by the town has been proceeding with MTO specifically because they would be the two co-proponents. It was only the town on the original EA process, and so that's why we haven't included the county at this time.
Thank you. And one more, and that would be with this kind of surprise, and am I wrong, or it was kind of a surprise to me that it got, how long have we been trying to get the Cookstown bypass and it's still not on the radar? So the fact that this one came up so quickly was good news for me. But will that require us through this next transportation master plan to advance any other work from the 400 to the 20th?
Yeah, I think we'll have to take a further look at that. We had started to do that, but we'll certainly advise council whether there's any other projects that would need to be moved up in the timeline currently. I mean, obviously, they're just starting the detailed design. Their website still doesn't indicate when construction would actually start. So as we move forward through the process, we can determine what impacts it would have.
Yeah, and that's a very good message, too, that, if anybody is watching, to manage expectations. It's not like you're going to see a shovel in the ground tomorrow there. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, there's a mover and a seconder for the report. All those in favor? That is carried. And next is D1. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Drudge will second this for me. Thank you. When I was reading the report, on page 3, it says the outcome of complaints received. And there's a breakdown, the number of inquiries, where there were noise, the number of orders issued, number of final orders issued, charges laid. And it says it's a compliance rate of 93%. So am I understanding correctly that there are very few houses that don't get the hint the first time we knock on the door? And that's where it escalates into the point?
Mr. Harris?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor. Yeah, so as of now, we have seen a high compliance rate. So just looking at that table there, we've kind of developed a process where we'll start with an order, we'll have a secondary order, and then if that doesn't work, we do proceed to charges if we have the evidence. So as outlined in the table, we have two files in the courts right now that are being played out, but we have found the majority of the people we're interacting with do come into compliance without the need for charges.
Okay, and that being the case, I'm gonna use an example that we all heard about this past weekend in a certain portion of town, where there were numerous cars, and I've got video clips that were sent to me when residents reached out and whatnot. If the situation arises something along the lines that there's hypothetically underage drinking, at which point do we bring in the South Simcoe Police? Do we contact them immediately to pass it off to them, or do we work in conjunction with them in that regard?
Mr. Harris?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor, we do work with South Simcoe Police in these matters sometimes. So depending on how we receive the complaint, sometimes we do receive it directly through the bylaw line, sometimes through South Simcoe Police, and they contact us. So if we come across something that warrants police investigation, we'll pass it along, and we'll also advise residents, to contact the appropriate party if they need to.
One last question then, if I may. If someone has a charge in the system and they say hypothetically get a $1,000 fine and it's in the courts, if there is an alternative incident or a subsequent incident while one charge is already in the system, can they be charged that second time, that third time, that fourth time if they don't go into compliance? Can it be because it's in the system, they can't be spoken to?
Mr. Harris?
Through your worship, the Deputy Mayor, yes, you can charge additionally on top of the original charge. Typically, we would see one charge, being issued, and then we'd collect evidence along that could be used for sentencing as well. But if the situation continues or there's additional noise complaints, we can return and still investigate and still lay charges.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So if that's the case, do we have anything in the system to escalate the fines? Is there something we can do to, if, a poke doesn't do it, a push might, and if the push doesn't, hitting them a little harder? Is there something that we can have that escalates it within the bylaws to educate in a fiscal manner where they seek not to hear?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Deputy Mayor Fowler. It depends on what the charge is for. So as an example, if they are zoning bylaw charges, the Planning Act sets out what the maximum fine is. I will say from experience, and Mr. Harris will know the same, that you typically get nominal fines first offense. But back to your question, if it's a repeated action, then that's the evidence that we would put forward to show there's a clear intent not to comply with the bylaw and looking for a larger fine.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. All winter, I didn't hear a single complaint about STAs. All of a sudden, it's spring, it's Innisfil, it's vacation time, and now it's my number one phone call that I get. So my question is when we have an STA, which is a ghost hotel, which is operating, and the owner has sold, and the new owner is doing the exact same thing, do we have to start the whole process all over again, or can we use that? Can we use old evidence against the new owner of that new hotel?
Director Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. To Councillor Waters. No, as a new owner, the charge is against the previous owner for the offense. So if the new owner contravenes the bylaw, they have to be charged.
So the process starts all over again, but we at least we have an eye on it. And I guess my question is as well is that for homeowners which live next to some of these ghost hotels, is the process is to call customer service and then bylaw comes out, or can they can phone bylaw directly when the infraction is happening?
Mr. Harris.
Through your worship, to Councillor Waters. So yes, I would encourage people to call through the customer service line. If it's after hours, we do have that option 5 on our system. So if there's a noise concern or something urgent after 5 o'clock or on the weekend, I would call that after hours line, but during normal business hours through customer service.
Okay, and one last question. In terms of calling bylaw, we had discussed the idea of monthly contact information being handed out to councillors. We used to get that, and I thought we were promised we would get that, but I still haven't received any information in terms of who the officers are on which days, which would be helpful to us when we do get those phone calls, that if it is at nighttime, it is after customer service hours, and they want to talk to somebody and bylaw officers are still on. When do we plan on getting that out? Thank you.
Mr. Harris, did you want to just go over the process of how bylaw officers on call would get a call from someone after hours?
For sure, thank you. Through your worship. So typically, after hours, we get dispatched by South Simcoe Police. So if it's after hours, after traditional business hours, but there's a bylaw officer on the road, they'll get the call directly to their phone. If it's after hours, let's say 2 o'clock in the morning, that goes to South Simcoe Dispatch. And if it's urgent, they'll call a bylaw officer. But we can definitely look at providing that information again to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? For the benefit of the newer councillors, I'm going to say particularly those who have shoreline in there, but not always. Like there's other areas now that we're seeing a lot of Airbnb. Actually, there's one on Leslie Street that is simply an empty living room with a disco ball. So it's definitely made for just kids' parties. So this has been an ongoing issue, and if you haven't heard about it yet, you're about to. This is the 7th report that has come to council on this issue, the first one going back to September of 2019. So it's not new, and it's not just in Innisfil. I can tell you it's across the country, and we all agree. I think there's I know the last council all agreed, and I'm going to assume that this council will all agree that ghost hotels, party houses are something we would all try to find a way to get rid of. Nobody wants to live next to one. We get complaints of multi-million-dollar homes on the lake with, that charge $3,000 a night, but when you put 30 people in there, it becomes affordable. So where we have not been able to come to consensus at this table with the last council is how do we deal with them? Medante tried to simply outlaw them, to simply say that ghost hotels were a commercial entity and they are not allowed. That went to the Ontario Land Tribunal and it got shut down. So that I did attend an OSM conference, Ontario Small Urban Municipal Conference, and STAs was a half-day program on one of the days of the conference, and there were 3 municipalities that presented. 2 of them had licensing programs. One was Town of the Blue Mountains, and one was Prince Edward County. And they went into great lengths about how and Town of the Blue Mountains now, it's because Town of the Blue Mountains was the very first, long before there was computers, long before there was Airbnb, they've had short-term accommodation issues. I remember going there in high school and there was party houses. So, but they've managed to find a way now to deal with it. But the issue is we can't get consensus on that because you see in the report the issues with compliance that reside doesn't necessarily mean that they're there all the time, and we don't have right of entry, so we can't just go in the door, and if you knock on the door and they say that the owner resides there, it's hard to prove that they don't. So that's one issue we have. And the other issue, I would say, Mr. Harrison, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the first charge we laid was when, and when does it go in front of a justice of the peace?
Through your worship, the charge was issued earlier this year, and we've been through the court process a few times, and it's back up again in September. So we'll be going on about 9 months, 10 months in the courts.
And there runs the other issue, because even after they're charged, they can still operate, and it becomes a problem there. But so there are issues with enforcement. It's not perfect. I think we're doing a much better job than we used to, but there are still limitations of what we can do with just pure enforcement. The issue with licensing that some municipalities do is people who hate Airbnbs don't like the fact that you're enabling them by licensing them. But on the other hand, if you give someone a license, you can take it away. It's a way of controlling them. And what Blue Mountain did is when they opened up the licensing regime, they limited the number. They had a demerit point system so they could be taken away. And they had rules like you had to have somebody who would respond within 15 minutes to a noise complaint at a responsible person. So through that system, they were able to take licenses away. And if when they opened it up for licensing, if one was found that didn't ask for a license and was found to be in contravention without having a license, they weren't allowed to get a license. So there's 2 ways, and I totally get it, because you don't want to feel like you're licensing them because you're enabling them. But on the other hand, right now we have no control that would at least give us some control. We could take something away. So anyway, I'll be happy to forward all those presentations to you so you can have a look through them and see what you think. And we're also watching closely Tiny Township. Tiny Township got as far as we did, but they actually went through with it. They decided to pass a bylaw to license them, and now they've got both sides appealing. So they've got the responsible, what do they call themselves? The responsible short-term accommodation people are appealing it because they don't want it, and the people who live next to them don't want them to be licensed, so they're appealing it. So we're watching that closely to see where they go, but it is a complicated issue, and certainly we'll keep working on it, and someday, some municipality somewhere is going to figure out how to do this perfectly. Councillor Waters.
Just a couple of things is that when we were at the Simcoe County workshops, and there was discussion around STAs, and I think it was Romero came up and said they were having some success. I didn't pursue it, but that's what we heard. So before tonight, I did go on Romero's website, and it seems that they do license, but you cannot own a business, another STA within 300 meters of an existing one. So you can go on their map and see where all their licensed accommodations are, and they have a circle around it which says, so I don't know how well that is working there for them, but I do know that they did say they're having some success, so it might be worthwhile inquiring what that success looks like. Last thing, I guess, when you do license, and I know we had this debate last time, is that, so if somebody does get a license and we take it away from them, what stops them from still having it as, a short-term accommodation illegally? So it was a great debate, and I know we went full circle, and I think we frustrated staff to no end around it, and because we did one of those few times that we disagreed with the staff report, but we know a lot of hard work goes into it, and it's such a hard issue to deal with. It's like fireworks. Sometimes you can't come to an agreement, and we just keep on stumbling through it, so I think we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give staff the last word, but just in response to that, how Town of Blue Mountains dealt with that was they have automated monetary policies, so they could penalize that if they did it illegally, and also they had an agreement with the short-term rental apps that if it didn't have a license number on the listing, it wouldn't be listed. So there's lots of ways to deal with it, and we can have this conversation another day. This is just an update because we required an update 9 months after we made the decision, and that's what this is. But, we can have lots of discussion on that in the future. And I'll give last word to Mr. Harris or Director Lee on this reoccurring issue.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dolan. And, I certainly, unfortunately, have a lot of history with short-term rentals as well. So, but we thought it was important. We did need to bring the report forward, and given there are so many new members of council, we thought it was important from an education perspective that all of council understood what the team does do in terms of education and resources and what the limitations are. So we'll certainly ensure that we're trying to educate the public. We've had some inquiries, obviously, about the one that Councillor Waters was raising from this 2 weeks ago. So we're going to continue to try and educate the public on what is allowed under the bylaws and what's not allowed.
Thank you very much. And Director Lee comes from short-term accommodation central in Ormodonte, so probably the most contentious municipality, at least in our region. So thank you so much for that. So we have a mover and a seconder to receive for information. Councillor Fowler, all those in favor, we've already got a mover and a seconder, and that is carried. Thank you very much. Now we'll have the RISE recommendation. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Fowler and Councillor Waters, all those in favor? That is carried. Next, we have the consideration to adopt the recommendations from Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Constantine. All those in favor? That is carried. Next, we have notice of motion, and that is Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. The reason I brought this forth...
Could we have a seconder, please? Seconder, Deputy.
Sure. Councillor Ices. Thank you. The reason I brought this forth initially was I took a look at the bylaws, and I've encountered a lot of our food truck operators at events throughout the town. And it's, in my opinion, as it's a good functioning bylaw, but it needs to be reinvestigated. It needs to be looked at. We have a town that's growing exponentially. faster than we intended. And in this scenario, when we had a smaller community, you could keep a rein on the number of trucks and whatnot. Now, as we're becoming more of a tourist destination, and it's clearly obvious from anybody who comes down to any of our beaches on the summer weekends, we need the opportunity to provide. And space is limited in town for building, for anyone who wishes to open any sort of business. This will allow someone who wants to come to Innisfil, create a job, and serve the community as well, whether they live here or whether they're a visitor. We can't limit it to 10. We need to create an economy. If we're going to have people come to town, let's give them something to come to town for. Let's bolster this, and who knows, anybody who has one of these food truck company businesses, it could be anything as small as a hot dog cart to Miss Richie's or wherever the case may be, you know, they can, if they get enough income, they can actually invest in the town themselves and create a space for another person. We're growing. Let's adapt. Let's show them that we're open to commerce, and we keep on saying we're innovative, but we're telling them, no, that's not good. No, you can't come in, you have to join a list. The list is only 10. We have to wait for somebody to leave. Let's show them that we can be creative, we can be innovative, and we can adapt. We have growth. Let's use it to our advantage. Let's create economy.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to say I disagree with this. I don't think this motion should go through for numerous reasons. Right now, it says report significantly increases the refreshment trailers. Significantly increasing them to what number? Secondly, you're saying it's going to bring jobs in. The trucks that come in are already staffed. And secondly, to allow greater freedom of movement of their wares. I'm going to tell you, every restaurant on Innisfil Beach Road, my restaurant, Sandy Cove, if someone parks a truck within any of those restaurants or that area, you will get 15 million phone calls from that restaurant owner. So this, I believe, is a very bad idea.
If I may.
No, we're going to go around the table first, and then you can. Anyone else? Councillor Drodge.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I definitely can see Councillor Saunders' point. We need to be respectful of the businesses that are in place right now, because I know of a few of them that actually are struggling, even though we have all these people that are coming into our town and enjoying all of our beaches and lakefront. So I definitely agree it needs to be more structured and specifically to what you're actually trying to change. If you're going to go buy 5 more or 20 more, I really think there needs to be a number there. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Richardson.
So through you, Your Worship, just curious, like on the website now, there's only 8 that are even registered. That there's still 2 spots open currently. It shows right now on the website. So just wondering, what's the need to increase if we're not even filling the 10 that we're able to fill right now?
Deputy.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to apologize to everybody. There was an amendment to the motion. If we look at the screen, it's not to significantly increase. It's to review the refreshment trailer policies to ensure they continue to be reflective of and conducive to the growing business community. So we're not looking to have a glut come in. We're just looking at growing with the growth of the community. And for a number of years during the last term, I witnessed people being turned away when there were 10 trucks and the same 10 trucks. And for example, one of them, I believe it was Marine's food trailer, she broke both her legs and was unable to proceed. That's why that one spot is particularly open. I understand Councillor Saunders' point, and I'm just saying we need to look at it. Let's take a good solid look at it and see what we can do, because there are ebbs and flows, and the fact of the matter is a lot of people cannot afford brick and mortar businesses in Innisfil. Alcona is very expensive. Stroud is filling up. Guildford, Bellevue doesn't have the space. Like, they don't have the regions for it. If we're having people come up here, why can't we find a way to monetize it? give some money back into the community, and if that happens, you know, potentially we could see about creating jobs in the areas where the restaurants are not located. Where
Councillor Constantine?
Do you think that there's need for more trucks? Because usually when people come, like people from Toronto or anywhere coming up here on the weekend, they usually come with their own food.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments or questions? Councillor Waters?
Yeah, I kind of agree that I don't think it's going to create any more jobs in Innisfil. I think most of the trucks are going to come from outside. So I don't think employment is the reason we want to do this. I think to review the policy, I think is okay, but to say to expand it exponentially I didn't know where that was going. I did see an opportunity around some of the end roads where there are no restaurants, those type of things, where not that might be an opportunity there at some of our parks, like 10th Line, that kind of stuff. So I'm okay with the review, but the idea of dictating expanding exponentially was scary to me. So a review of it I think is okay, but the other wording was, I would have voted the whole policy down, yes.
Thank you. I just had a couple of comments. So I agree with a refresh for sure. This bylaw was written in 2013, so it's 10 years old, and I think any bylaw that's 10 years old deserves a look. I was around when we passed this bylaw, and you're exactly right. That was the restaurants came out in droves, not wanting food trucks because the general consensus from the restaurant owners was, we're here in January, we're here 12 months of the year, 7 days of the week. There comes a hot, long weekend, all these food trucks come into town and take the busy times. So that was why the original limit was put on. I can't remember why they weren't allowed to move around the town. I can't remember that part. But I also know that food trucks back then were basically French fry trucks. Like, food trucks weren't kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of trendy as they are now, like with, taco trucks and all these different types of trucks. It's become more of a thing, grilled cheese trucks. And so definitely I think it's worth a refresh, but in consultation with local businesses, for sure, because people who are paying business tax 12 months of the year deserve to weigh in on this before we pass anything. Director Lee?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. As council's all aware, we are going through and doing the economic development strategy right now, so it's probably an appropriate time that it be incorporated within that process, which would allow the business owners to have the comments as well as others.
I like that, incorporating it as opposed to having it as a separate, where you're already engaging. And then you're not only engaging businesses that will say, keep them out, you'll engage new entrepreneurs that maybe would like to start something locally. Because I think that was also the other fear, is that they were going to come from elsewhere and not be Innisfil food trucks. Any final questions or comments? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like the idea. I'm trying to think of a way to rephrase it, then to review the refreshment trailer policies to ensure they continue to be reflective and conducive to the growing business community. But can we change it to conducive to in consultation with or in conjunction with the growing business community? Like, that way they're included in the process. We give them a voice.
Or perhaps in conjunction with the economic development strategy? Does that work? What does the seconder think of that?
Yeah, Your Worship, I like the latter comment about the economic development strategy.
Councillor Waters?
Just a question to just to council is there an opportunity, because we would like to see those jobs be in-house in terms of Innisfil, whether or not restaurants in Innisfil would be interested in would they start up their own side business so they could serve the end roads and those types of things. Okay, that was just a question. I just.
But I think that's something that could be sussed out in the economic development strategy. I know Ms. Thompson's working really hard and reaching out to different business groups and stakeholders, and there's a survey now that we were given today. So I would suggest that. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, I'd love to see the Coke Cafe truck down by 10th line. That would work out really.
Deputy Feller.
Just one final comment. I like the idea of with the Economic Development Strategic Plan. As we're known to say, we don't micromanage. We give it to the experts and we give them ideas and they return with their plans and then we hash it out as it goes. So I like the idea that we're investigating, we're looking, we're trying to figure out what we can do to expand or if there isn't, even if a need is there. So get it on the table, get it in the system, and then when the report comes back, we can hammer out even more finer details if it comes down to it. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mayor Dolan, just one final comment. Because it is part of the zoning bylaw, in the event council does make the decision to modify the bylaw, it would have to go through a staff-initiated zoning amendment and a public meeting. So we won't initiate any of that until there's a determination. We'll work through this first part, but there would still be further work in terms of amending the zoning bylaw subsequently.
Understood. Thank you. So again, managing expectations, like everything in government, it's a lot more complicated than you think it is out of the gate. Questions, comments, seeing none. So everybody look at the wording on the screen to see if it suits you. And we have a mover and a seconder, and I'm going to ask all in favor. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next, we move on to a notice of motion from Councillor Ices. It's just noticed tonight, so we'll be dealing with that on June the 28th. And next, we have announcements. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had the opportunity to open the Innisfil Farmers Market last Thursday on a nice hot summer day, and that continues every Thursday, so head down there to get your farm fresh goods. On June the 14th, Sunnybray is having a fun fair between 5 and 8 o'clock, raising money for playground equipment. They're asking you to bring a donation for the food bank. On June 17th, Father's Day weekend on the Saturday, the Stroud volunteer firefighters are having their annual breakfast. So you can bring Dad out for a nice pancake breakfast with the Stroud firefighters. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Constantine.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the Live for United Church will be having a vendor sale on Saturday, June 10th from 9 to 2. There will be craft sales and much more. So please go out and support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got a couple, so I apologize. So number one, thank you to everyone that came out on Monday for the Meet Councillor Night. I had a lot of fun. Also on Saturday last week, I got to go to my first birthday party as a councillor just to celebrate a birthday for Ann Timpson's 80th birthday, so that was a lot of fun. On Tuesday starts the library summer reading program. Also, Miss Jenny's on June the 10th. They're in their 15 years, which is amazing. They're having their recital at Georgian College. They were also recently recognized by the South Simcoe Business Excellence Award, which is really awesome. Our Nantyre girls soccer, they went undefeated this year, so they were the regional winners, which is really awesome. Nantyre Band will be performing at Onion Fest on Saturday, June the 24th from 12:30 to 1:30. You should go check them out. They are a gold-winning band. Also at Onion Fest with the Lions, we're doing kids bingo from 1:30 to 3:30. We'll be collecting money for Deafblind Ontario. With that being said, yarn bombing also took place on June the 1st at the library. It's to bring awareness to deaf blindness. It's a positive form of graffiti. Looks really awesome. Also, the Innisfil Minor Baseball Association, they just recently raised, they had a used equipment sale where they raised $700, which they will be using to purchase food to fill the Troy Scott fridges, which is really awesome. And then lastly, as Councillor Saunders mentioned, I did attend the Breaking Barriers session at Sunnybray a couple weeks ago, and I had a blast, and I can't wait for other ones that I could be hopefully invited to.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few items. The Seniors High Tea by the Lions and the Seniors Hub last Sunday raised $254 for the food bank, and the next one is in September. Then the Lions open mic Thursday from 7 to 11, so if you have a good voice, unlike me, I'll watch. And then on... I could sing, and that would embarrass them.
Just come.
Yeah, there. And then on, there's a kids' dance party, Innisfil at Alcona Glen, Friday at 6:45 if you feel young and you want to get up on the floor. There we go.
Thank you. Councillor Zanella.
I just wanted to thank the residents of Ward 5 that came out to my neighborhood nights last night. It was a great night. Lots of people came out, and it was a beautiful evening, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. So did I. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking forward to my night on the 22nd, so I hope everybody in Ward 6 comes out. A couple of things. Friday Harbor has started their summer market series on Saturday and Sunday. So go down and see all the new markets and the crafts and that on Saturdays and Sundays. And on the Father's Day, they're doing a luxury car and classic car display, which is free of charge. And then they have a family obstacle course that people can go through it, which is really cool. And they're giving prizes for the fastest time. That's it.
Thank you. And Councillor Drodge.
Thank you. So nothing really new upcoming, but we did just this past weekend do the Cookstown Wing Ding, and it was a great success. I walked around for 4 hours, could barely walk afterwards. But I did notice the storefronts had all their stuff out on display. So guys, once the Wing Ding's over, those storefronts are still there. So we should always keep trying to go there and try to utilize those people and buy stuff, lots of stuff.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a bit of a busy week. That's a tongue twister. This past June 2nd, we had at the town, we had the Pride flag raising. It was really good that we had so many people there. South Simcoe Police was a massive support. On the 3rd, at the library, they had the Sandy Cove Art Club, which was really cool. I managed to go and purchase a couple of pieces. There was some really good talent coming out of Sandy Cove when it comes to it. And many of these people never really picked up a brush before they joined the club. So it just goes to show the level of teaching that's going on. After that, I went to Grange Hall, where they did a silent auction. Pride was in charge of it. They raised a good deal of funds for the church, which is nice. On the 4th, I attended, well, many members of council attended the welcoming party for Pastor Jennifer Von Hay. She is moving on to a new place down in King City where they're assisting live-in rehab facilities, and she will be sorely missed. She is a beacon of light in this community, and anybody who's ever met her will tell you her smile lights up the room. So she was the highlight of Ward 5. This June 10th at the YMCA, Officer Elizabeth will be there with her team for the Bike Safety Rodeo. So bring your kids out. It's good learning about safety, what's required, and all the fun things you can do. On the 17th, we have the Historical Society public art launch at Innisfil Beach Park, and they are going to be there, which is another reason for me to go and buy art. And last but not least, at the YMCA between the 23rd and the 25th, we have Onion Fest. So that's another full day of spending money. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, you had another one?
Yes, I did forget one item, and that's on every Thursday night down at Innisfil Beach Park is a classic car evening. It's a wonderful show. Innisfil has an abundance of classic cars, and they all show up there. So I would highly recommend that anyone who's interested in spending a nice evening, some really interesting people, some good people, and some awesome cars.
Thank you. It always amazes me how much is happening in our town. I just have a couple things that hadn't been mentioned already. One of them was a thank you to the Tanger Riocan, made a donation for the Troy Scott Community Fridge, over $3,000. And if your group or organization thinks they might be able to help, there's a Fill the Fridges initiative going on, and it's on our website. You can get more information there. Many of our schools have been celebrating end of year. I will mention Councillor Constantine and I were at the Killarney Beach Party School, but Goodfellow School this year on May the 30th celebrated their 50th anniversary, and it was really very touching. I was there with the Goodfellows, which was kind of nice, but also there was a gentleman there who was the first graduating class out of that school. And this year, his great-granddaughter, 50 years later, will be in the graduating class this year. So it was lovely to meet them. I want to say a great big thank you to Nikki Ballas and her team and Karen Shea for organizing the event today at the Morgan Russell Memorial Arena. And thank the Marissa and the girls for allowing us to share some of Morgan's memory on our building. And we are looking forward to going to Bradford, West Gwillimbury in the next coming weeks to dedicate a park in honor of Devin Northrop. And there's still time. We have a strategic plan survey up on the website. There's still time for you to go on there and have a look at that, fill it out, give us your comments on what you think that this term of council should concentrate on in the next 4 years. Also, a big thanks to the staff at the park, Chris and team, for the work that was done on the Innisfil Pride flag there and the beautiful landscape feature. And I think that's, and then we all enjoyed going to Lake Haven to see the opening of the Park Bridge Mattamy Home housing development. And if you haven't, the model homes are open every weekend, and I would encourage everybody to go and have a look because they're absolutely beautiful. And I would ask Mr. Gershow, nothing from the staff side? Okay, so that's it for announcements. And remember to send your announcements in writing to Kim so she doesn't have to decipher all of our muffled voices on the tape. And the confirming bylaw is moved by Councillor Saunders and seconded by Deputy Mayor Fowler. All those in favor? That is carried. And we have adjournment. Moved by Councillor Drudge, seconded by Councillor Richardson at 9:02 p.m. Our next meeting of council is June the 28th. It's a different night because we want to support the Lake Simple Foundation. So it's June the 28th, and it will be a very heavy agenda. I'm warning you ahead of time because we're not going to have any meetings in July. So that will be your reward for your long meeting on June the 28th. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. And thanks for everybody who hung out till the end of the meeting. Usually we don't have anybody left at this point. So thank you so much.